Hello, everybody. Welcome back to day 2 of 21 days reprogramming the matrix in you, or breaking through the matrix in you. My name is Jona, Bryndis, and next to me
It's
sits
Jeff Casper. Hello,
and
everyone.
we're airing from transCODES, energy coaching, and energy training. All right, if you followed day 1, then you may have found that we have started our 21-day sort of breaking through a habit, which is kind of like, most of these programs, coaching programs, kind of suggest. But you may have noticed that we've done it differently. We've approached it differently. We asked you yesterday to qualify your goals and to turn them in to purpose. And there's a reason for that. Today, we're going to talk about how to actually commit to a purpose, to a goal. And there's many different reasons why people want to change habits or why they want to break through certain programmings that they have. So I want to take out the notion here that this is all just about breaking through bad habits. Bad or good habits from an energetic point of view don't really matter. What matters are the habits itself. So whether or not a habit is positive for you or not is something, quite frankly, most of us are not 100% aware of. And so what we try to relay to you here are pathways and modalities, how you can approach breaking through any kind of habit or building any kind of new habit. And one of the major things that you've already noticed yesterday is that we promoters of understanding that the whole reprogramming process is a cycle. And we saw a few pictures yesterday, and I want to pick up on one of these pictures and loosen things up here a bit. So going through, our personal psychology, okay? So how do we perceive the process of change, and what are our reactions? But before we get into the nitty-gritty here, I want to welcome all of you from all over the place. Please let us know what countries you are watching from. We're doing this live so that we can respond to your comments and questions, and we hope that you do, because otherwise we could just record this and have a much easier, deal with these videos, because we wouldn't have to deal with software and lighting and all these kind of things. All right, so please let us know when you have a question. This is all based on science. I just want you to know that these days that you see, the physiology of building new neural pathways is very well examined. But like we talked about last time, the myth of it taking 21 days to break a habit comes basically from a book that is very successful and is often cited and used in coaching and success training. But looking at the mechanics of success from an energetic point of view, we'll see the cycle that we are all in, or the journey, if you will, is much more complex than most of us realize at first. All right, I hope you can all read this. There's a funny side to understanding our psychology, and it starts up on top at 12 o'clock here with, of course, day 1 and day 2, and this is where we're at right now. You may not think that way at this very moment, but you motivated, okay? Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to us right now. And so the inner communication here is like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's awesome. I can do this. And then something happens, and that's usually at day 3 till day 8, according to research. And that's when our ego begins to resist. That's when we run into our first sort of encounters with, the stuff that holds us back. And yesterday, remember I said, we want to have a look at what we're up against. And today we're going to have a deeper look into that and, what our pitfalls are. It is very important for us to know when we start the process of changing something in our lives that we know what our potential pitfalls are, at least the ones that we are aware of. In the course of these 21 days here, we'll go really deep into energetic programming, and you will find that there are hidden or subconscious blocks that you would have never thought really being part of your system. And the reason why we go so deep here is mostly to increase your awareness and also your compassion for yourself. And why changing a habit or implementing a new habit or change is not always just a matter of willpower. We are in the middle of a massive collective change right now, and this is exactly what you can observe on the collective level. So we're not just dealing with our own, we're also dealing with some of these outer control mechanisms. And we'll talk about those in a minute. But let's continue here. So what happens day 3 to day 8? I hate this. This isn't working. Oh, Jona, just talks bullshit. And Jeff just laughs. Right? This isn't working. Or it goes against yourself more.
Self-bashing, yes.
More like in ways of like, I'm an idiot, or why am I not getting this?
Right.
And this is a normal process, guys. And I want you to know that this is typically where 80% of people quit. Day 3 till 8. So the first day is like motivation. The second day, you actually start, noticing some change. And that's also then when resistance sets in. And day 9 till 24, is when you realize, okay, this is really about, getting back on track, reminding myself to do the things that can help me in this phase, all right? And I called this here relapsing and backing and getting back on, because it's really just about accepting at this point that it's going to be a little challenging in the beginning. If it was so easy, you would have implemented whatever it is that your purpose is much earlier. And then after day 24, and this is like here where this 21-day myth comes from. So it's really day 18 till 24 that are sort of those plateau days, and then we get into this place where things calm down a bit more, and we're not really feeling this really extreme sort of up and down anymore, and we recognize that it's really just a matter of adjusting to things as they occur, and we learn ourselves. We learn how we react in certain situations and learn how to clear those. And then, in that phase, from day 25 to 35, we're starting to feel okay with things. And then after that, it gets even easier, and that is the day 36 till 66, which is where most of our shifting and adapting occurs, which is why science has agreed that by day 66 is when we typically are able to, establish a new behavioral pattern. That's when, a new behavior really grips. And they call this a plateau, or we called this a plateau yesterday, basically meaning that now you're on the horse, it's going for you, and you feel motivated, but it's not really that you experiencing it as a challenge, it's working for you.
It's a potential new norm, basically a normalcy, or like a normal way of doing things at that point.
Further, though, we have to understand that just the fact that we are able to implement a new behavior does not necessarily mean that this is already sort of anchored in our nervous system. This actually takes a little longer. This takes until day 254. And so what happens is after the day 66 is that we go into a phase of integration. So here now we begin to see how this new habit or how this change affects different areas of my life, okay, and we feel proud of ourselves, and we are actually seeing ourselves being able, to apply it everywhere. And then after the 3 months mark, is usually when we really begin to see that this is, a part of us now. I'm loving it, now, I can tackle anything. We've experienced ourselves in many different challenging situations, that shows us we can handle this. And that's really day 500 is when we really begin to thrive with this new habit. And you guys may be able to recall this with anything that you have changed in your life, like significant things. That's actually when this point sets in where you can't even remember what the problem was. Why was this so hard for me to change? However, and this is now the main thing that I wanted to get across, really at that point of new neural pathways are created, everything is going well, you're now beginning to go into the fine-tuning of things, which means seeing that, there are some things that are okay, but I want to change something different, or I want to make corrections here or there, and you begin the cycle over again. So this is really the main point of what we want to get across today, is that you see your change as a cycle or a spiral, if you will, rather than an event. And especially something that is not really just dependent on your willpower, like this is another myth that people think that changing a habit or implementing a new habit has something to do with if you just want it enough, or if you just believe in it hard enough, it's going to happen for you. It's not quite that easy. It's a bit more complex than that. And so, today's understanding of implementing changes, which is very important, as you can imagine, in marketing, for instance, or for any kind of implementation of new laws or new technologies. This kind of research is usually financed through those kind of industries. Oops, and here we have a little software thing. I want to show you guys what this looks like and what you can expect when you want to change a habit. What can you expect? All right, let's have a look at this here. How long does this take to change something, and on which levels do these implementations or changes actually take place? So the first day, and within one day, we can change a physical action. You can go out and to the gym and exercise. That's something that has to do with willpower. And if it's related to your direct well-being, that'd be easy. That's a physical activity. That's a doingness that can be accomplished in one day. To change an emotional response, and this is the next phase, the tricky phase where people usually quit, where you get these emotional ups and downs, all right, and where your attitude gets challenged and constantly, is constantly sort of under attack. Basically, that takes 18 days. Between those, between 18 and 24 days, this is how long it takes actually for your mind to accept, okay, she's serious now. She really wants to change. All right. This is why science agrees that at 21 days, you can go into the acceptance of change. But again, here 66 days is how long it takes to actually change a behavior. So here at transCODES, with our sacred self healing community, we know this. So we have programs here that are based on on this learning curve and on the way people experience their journey. So after 66 days, we usually have a point with the clients where we want them to do an inventory, where we want them to look back and see, what they have already accomplished, so that for the next phase, which is this longer phase, to the 9-month mark, roughly, where they can go into congruence and really check out, if this is all, truly how they want it, how they want the change. So not just what they want, but also how they want this. And then it takes roughly another 6 months to really change this energetic patterning in a person. However, and this is something very important to realize, and you can see this is hinted at in this infographic here, there is a way to bypass some of these neurological limitations that we have, and that is through the spiritual, through the etheric intervention that we can do. We can go in and change, some of our neurological patterns, some of our emotional patterning, some of our behavioral patterning, and even some of our physical patterning through higher vibrational intervention on the spiritual level. Okay, and that's something that we will mainly be talking about here in these 21 days. All right, so when talking about how we need to approach things, then I want to look back real quick to yesterday. So yesterday, we talked about the why. And this is very, very important, because the why will be something that you will have to remind yourself of over and over and over again whenever you run into a challenge. Today, we want to talk about the how, all right? And there are aspects to, the challenges, as we talked about yesterday, that can come from, very unexpected directions. And so today we're going to talk about the ego and how the ego controls some of our reactions to challenges, and how to anticipate, or how to know better what we can expect with ourselves, as our personal pitfalls, as our personal challenges. And for that, we need to understand the nature of our ego. The nature of our ego is not as most people think, and this is a bit sort of coming from the psychology, the definition of ego as just egotistical. It's not incorrect, but the main point about the ego is that it is an intrinsic part of our survival system, and that we really need it. We need it to survive. It secures, our physical and often also our emotional survival. Okay, and so what happens is that the ego links into our nervous system and tells us, what could be a potential threat. And potential threats are then handled with, our most basic reactionary patterns, and they are fight, flight, or freeze. So if you find yourselves in any of these coping patterns, as we call them, fight, flight, or freeze, then know that this is not like something bad about you. It is something that is programmed into your system. You have to understand that. It is not something that works against you. It is something that has to do with your survival on the most rudimentary or fundamental level of your existence. The only problem with that is that after a while, we think that, okay, so if this is here how my life is, how the world is. All I got to do is go into control. All I need to do is then control the environment a little better, right? Or control the people a little better, or control my circumstances all the way to that I don't run into these potential threats anymore. And to a degree, that is part of our, like, say, collective development.
Right.
You know, we've controlled many. I mean, we're not chased by lions anymore, and you know, we don't have to really fight for our physical survival, at least not here in the first world. So we don't really have you know, these really, really threatening situations anymore. So basically our nervous system overreacts to pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ego is really the part in us, you know, that makes us feel like we're gonna die. And subjectively, that is, you know, really how this comes across to us. And then our reaction is as if we were gonna die. And the energy that we want to bring in here for you for these 21 days is serenity. Mm-hmm. Serenity is an energy form, and we talk about this here when we go to the spiritual modalities that we want you aligned to, but is a resonance that helps you to let go of control. And it comes down to this very, very simple paradigm, and that is we need to focus on the things that we can control. Mm-hmm. And really learn or remind ourselves to let go of what we cannot control. Mm-hmm. This is sort of the message here for you guys on your journey. Now, when we talk about ego control, Jeff, and this is something that we, you know, work with a lot here in energy coaching, energy training. Right. A lot of people first understand it as like, well, I don't try to control anybody. Yes and no.
Right.
So when we talk about ego control, we're mostly talking about the control that a person tries to exert to his or her own life. Mm-hmm. You know, and this can include others, but oftentimes it really isn't directed at others. In extreme forms,
it can be. Right, projections and stuff. Yeah.
Yes, and a lot of these control mechanisms that are a bit more unconscious to us, we will talk about those later, because when we have inner control, and this includes self-control, guys. Mm-hmm. So self-control can get you past the first 2 days, all right? But then,
then you're in trouble.
Yeah. Because you will eventually run out of self-control. So there's got to be more there. There's got to be an emotional component. You got to be able to manage your emotional responses to things. Mm-hmm. And your thought patterns, you know, like where do my thoughts go with this? And also, of course, your bigger picture thinking, you know, like this is, yeah, sure, you can control your environment to a certain degree, but then, you know, it begins to control you. Mm-hmm. So the serenity really here is something that is that we, as those of us here on our spiritual or awakening journey, need to integrate into all areas of our lives. Like for me, it often comes up with expectations. So mm-hmm. here on day 2, the biggest pitfall that you're up against is your expectation. Mm-hmm. And we have created a little tracker sheet for you that you can download. It will be posted in this video, in the text, in the description text here, that will help you to track some of that. So the expectations, we try to take this out by showing you these cycles and to make it clear to you that this is not like a ladder or ascension, that is more something that works like this. So there will be things that you need to revisit on a different layer. And again, here, just as a reminder, we will make an effort to take these things apart from the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and energetic layer for you, because these can display differently.
Yes.
And so before we get to this place where we want you to commit to your purpose, which will be the goal of this day 2 video, and also the homework for tomorrow, when we're going to be talking a little more about powers and talents, like how they can actually support us in that. So today we want to just illuminate, some potential pitfalls, and then tomorrow we're going to look at, what are the supporting powers that we have. Okay, so translated control into the physical, and how you can work on overcoming your need to control things. Well, not all of you have physical goals. So if you have a physical goal, like say you want to lose weight, or you want to exercise more, you want to change your diet, then it's easy. But if you have more of a spiritual goal, or a higher vibratory goal, as we call this, then it's a little harder to see. But either way, the on the physical, on the action level, the modality that you need to focus on to overcome your ego's resistance and the need to control something happens through adding a new activity, like literally doing something new. That would be our tip here, physically. Or find a different way of doing. This can be as simple as, like, say, driving home from work. You take a different route. Challenge some of these muscle memory patterns that you have, and get used to this. So implement this. Every implementation step here of the day is something that you will continue for the entire 21 days.
You're trying to break out of the rigidity of those certain roles. So you start to try different things. So if you do certain types of exercises, try different ones. Do something that you've always wanted to do. Begin to break that pattern, those rigid patterns, and begin to feel your body move in slightly different ways. Or like Jona said, do things that let you see different scenery or whatever. Even going for a hike, different places will do this. It'll begin to break the rigidity.
Yes, on an emotional level, we want you to really tune into how your emotions respond to resistance. Okay, this is not the same for everybody, and this is very important for you to understand your inner programming. Namely, what is my initial response? This could be, you could use the distinction between fight, flight, or freeze, but that's more for those of you who already have a little practice in that, because it's not that easy to identify at first. It'd be easier to identify like your emotions, like when something happens that challenges you, or when you run into like not being able to meet your needs, or you're not able to implement your challenge, like, or you go on that day, how you emotionally respond to this. Do you get angry at yourself, or do you get angry at your kids or your pets, or do you get sad, or what is the primary emotion that tells you that you're running into an inner resistance? Mentally, watch very carefully where your thoughts go with this resistance. Where do they go? Do they immediately go in like self beat up, for instance, or do they go into like making something on the outside, the external part wrong, like blaming things on the outside,
or even approval seeking?
Yes, another way to work mentally, to work with resistance, is also to find out, what your sort of way out is, your exit strategy, because that's usually supported and justified by the mind, is like your avoidance or your distraction, like where does this go? We're going to revisit this pretty much here and every day, because this is a big part of reprogramming. You have to kind of identify your own programming first. Behaviorally, because this is a little, it's a combination of mental, physical, and emotional reactions, like what are some of the coping behaviors that you have when you get really frustrated, or when you run into your ego's resistance. Do you resort to eating a gallon of ice cream? Do you resort to gaming, excessive gaming?
Right.
Or do you
You
engage in any type of addictive behavior? Because those are usually linked to our ego's resistance.
And especially the next few, like 5 days or so, these will really be strong. If you're sticking with this program, they'll really show up. The distraction patterns, the ways out, I need to go do this, I need to go do that. And it's just this repetitive attempt for your mind to try to take control again.
On a spiritual level, we discussed this here before the video. It's really important to understand that the path is your journey. What you are about to commit to is a new way and not necessarily an outcome. So for today, we just want you to really sort of wrap your everything around that this is not an event, that this is a process.
And the beauty of that, and what Jona mentioned a bit on the chart with the 2 arrows, is that by aligning to a spiritual process or from the heart-based programming, this process of 66 days, 21 days, 500 days, the whole process, it can actually shortcut it. But it's because by adding in the heart-based programming, what we'll talk about here a little bit every day, is you begin to enhance your energetic state, and that will actually increase the ability to face these things and the ability to actually integrate faster. It's really beautiful.
And that leads us then to the energetic part of your implementation and reflection routine, and that is to see everything as a mirror. See everything outside of you as a mirror of your inside. And remember, and this is here where these individual days grab into another, remember to breathe through your heart whenever you are faced with a challenge, no matter what it is, whether it's physical or emotional or mental, behavioral, whatever. You remember to go into the safe space that we introduced to you yesterday, the space where you really let go of the external and just focus on the internal. And you're adding now another component to that, and that is trying to control the external, because this is usually where our ego goes. As soon as there is a resistance or a challenge, our ego tries to control it or yourself or others. All right, and the spiritual view of that is to really let go of these patterns that are mirrored in your daily life, that are manifested in your daily life. And your homework for tomorrow will be working with the tracker here that we have for you, and then we will get to your questions, because I've already seen that there are some cool questions. This sheet that we've prepared here for you, this tracker, is something that you can download. So I'll put the download link in the video here. I just want you to see this real quick so that we can explain this. This is something that I would recommend you to start with today. So this is what the tracker looks like, and it asks you to commit. It asks you to commit to change itself and to letting go of ego control. And if you look here into the accountability section, I want you to put a check mark there, just as a reminder for you that yes, I am okay with change. And yes, I admit that I am not in control. And yes, the process is my path, the cycle, basically. And then I want you to come up with your purpose. And you don't really have to have a specific goal. You could write down things such as, I want to change the way I interact with other people, or I want to change some patterns in my relationship, or yes, I would like to have healthier habits, such as diet or exercise, or I don't want to be angry all the time,
or afraid,
or afraid. I want to change the way I see the world. It could be anything. This is that's why we don't call this a goal. We call this a purpose for you. And then in the green section down here, you see like a congruence checker, congruence check. Okay, and what this is to give you yourself basically the feedback, how well you've done on a day. And congruence is not the same as success. Congruence means, do you still feel okay with the process? Are you, in a good place with this, even if you had challenges? Okay, so that's important. It's not about measuring your success. It's about measuring your congruence. And challenges, I want you to write down here into this yellow section. As you go, write down the challenges that you've encountered. Like certain things that trigger your emotion that you found out. I mean, there's things that I found out the first time I tried to actually consciously reprogram myself and create a new habit that I had no idea of, that influenced me, that control me from the outside. What is outer control really, as compared or in conjunction or context with our ego control, and what is matrix control? These things we want to discuss here as well. But let me first answer a few questions that came from you. And by the way, yes, hey, Rhode Island, we're seeing you. Okay, so here, do letting go of attachments, is this part of our emotional change category, attachments? So it depends on how you define attachments, okay? Because we can have an emotional attachment to something like, say, our kids, right? I mean, we're emotionally attached to our kids.
Yes.
And then there is an attachment that we can have to success or to fame or to external things such as, like how my house looks like on the outside, or how what other people think of me. Right. That is an attachment that is not so much an emotional attachment. It's more like a mental attachment, that has to do with judgment, how I think other people see me.
But those usually have emotions underneath them. So as you work through the mental, releasing the attachment mentally, you'll have emotions pop up underneath it. So there's usually a component with most attachments that are emotional based.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday, how they're all staggered. So no matter what the attachment is, and it can even be like, say, a spiritual belief, that can display itself as an attachment on your journey, how you're supposed to act like or to be like when you're spiritual. Okay, so the idea or the identification with being spiritual, or any identification for that matter, creates attachments. I hope this helped to answer the question.
It's a good one, though. Yeah.
Yes, New Zealand. Hi. Okay. Yeah, so, okay, there's some cool comments. Thank you guys for your comments. Anything that has to do with the technical issues is something that we cannot really control, and therefore we let go of this here while we're talking with you, and focus on getting the context and the content across. So let's discuss here, before we let you go into day 3, let's discuss matrix control and ego control, and how they play into another, and what this even means. Jeff, do you want to
I can give it
jump
a shot.
in here?
Of course, yes. Matrix control usually is part of the collective unconscious. What happens is we have certain programs and patterns that, being human, that when we come into the human world, we're going to have to work through those typically. Some people more than others, depending upon what we have for our choices and all that, and also our family setup. But then when we get into ego control, then you're looking into your own personal programming that either you've developed through the collective or you've brought it up through your experiences. So all these control programs that show either or come up from the matrix programming or from your own, those are the things that are going to come in as resistance. So matrix control might be that right now it's a very masculine-based world. There's a lot of tension around that. There's a lot of issues with that. A personal ego control might be something to do with you have a huge guilt program, or you have issues with addictive structure, or you have issues with having lots of anxiety or fear. Both of those programs, both of those types of control are going to be in your system. So when you begin to change things or you try to change things, typically one or both show up.
And they often work together as well. So there are, of course, things that you can observe in our societies, that play into, some of the understanding of ourselves, some of the understanding of the world, and the cultures and so forth. So there are issues in our societies that directly trigger some of our ego control mechanisms. So in this world here, in the early 21st century, we are experiencing a lot of control from the outside on many different levels. And while this seems to be relatively free today compared to maybe the Middle Ages, we still have a lot of outer control that affects us. And some of these control mechanisms, whether, you believe in conspiracy theories or not, is irrelevant, because what they all have in common, no matter where they're coming from, is that they trigger some of your ego control. So basically, what we're saying here is that the matrix programming that we all have, be it through etheric implants, be it through cultural, sociological, or family conditioning, doesn't matter where it originally came from, it got translated in your system into ego control. And so, but when we look at the entirety of the process, namely breaking through matrix programming, we are starting where it actually, manifests in your life. And that is how your ego jumps on it, and where it latches on, and where you basically translate this into your personal life on, these different levels, namely the physical, the emotional, the mental, the behavioral, and the spiritual. So that's important to understand. There are different aspects to the matrix programming, and some of which we will encounter here in the following days. For instance, when we talk about karma, and collective karma, when we talk a little more about pain and addiction, and how all these things, are also triggered from the outside, willingly or unwillingly. The main thing is, at this place that we're at here, day 2, committing to a new way. And, committing to letting go of our ego's control. That we have made a very, very important step in liberating ourselves from matrix programming, whether we are aware of it or not.
Well, it's a new stance, too. So now you're saying no matter what comes up, no matter where it comes from, whether it be collective, whether it be your mother-in-law, whether it be, something from wherever, it doesn't matter. You're staying on course.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful thing, because as you do that, and with the intention set forth by staying in the heart-based programming, the ego's going to lose. It is.
So that's really what we wanted to get across for today. And so tomorrow we're going to talk about our true talents and our true powers, and how they can support us on this journey. And for now, I wish you guys have fun or not. I wish you to experience some of your inner ego resistances in a very conscious way, because this will really open up your view of looking at some of your life's experiences, and also what is holding you back from accomplishing that you want to accomplish in your life. So hope to see you here tomorrow, 1 p.m. As every day. All the best for you. Thank you for coming, and don't forget to smash that like button. That's your contribution here for us. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.